One of the biggest accomplishments is clearly the passage of the American Rescue Plan, coming off of the biggest global pandemic that we faced in a generation, definitely in my lifetime, and all of the families, particularly Black families that were impacted during COVID-19 and the economic recession that has followed, that has disproportionately affected Black workers, particularly Black women in the workplace. And so as a member of the Ways and Means Committee, I've been a leader on the child tax credit, for example, which has lifted 50% of children and almost 60% of Black children out of poverty. And we know that when we do that, not only do we improve their life chances of success, of being able to enter school ready to learn, reading by the 3rd grade, graduating on time, going on to post-secondary education, but it also improves their health outcomes, it improves their economic outcomes, which really does transform communities for the future, which is what we really should be all about in our public policy making. Staff on the Capitol and people all across the country, watched and observed in really in horror to have the U.S. Capitol attacked, the worst assault on the Capitol building since the War of 1812. And not only was it an attack on the Capitol itself, the building, the complex, our police officers, but it was an attack on our democracy, on the fundamental way of life of our free and fair elections, on making sure the votes that are cast are counted. I represent Nevada. We were one of the states that were being challenged that day. And so I was actually in my office preparing to go to the floor to make my statement on why the electoral count was sound, why we did have secure elections, why the election here in Nevada was fair. And I received the notice to evacuate, my staff and I, and ultimately we're put into the bunker with other members based on the serious escalation that was occurring, in the actual Capitol dome. But later that day, like others, I was resolved that we had to complete the work. We had to make sure that the electoral count was complete so that we could have the transition from the previous administration to President Biden, and to show America and to show the world that our democracy, while frayed at times, was still going to be upheld in that moment. Well, actually, I never planned to go into public service. This was not my plan. I didn't come out of high school, go to college. I'm the first in my family to attend college. And so it wasn't like I'm gonna do these steps and then ultimately that's gonna lead me to a life of public service. What I knew is I always wanted to give back to the community that I was raised in here in Las Vegas and North Las Vegas, because I always wanted to see things get better in one way or another. And so whether that was in my work in the nonprofit, in employment and training and workforce development or youth engagement, serving in the legislature or now in Congress, the through line for me is just giving back to community. And if I can do that by serving in public office, then that's one way, but there's other ways, and we all can give back in one way or another. Mentoring young men is something that we can do. Helping young women who are starting their own businesses, particularly Black women entrepreneurs, which is one of the fastest growing sectors of small business. making sure that they have the support they need as they start and grow those businesses. Reading to children in schools, particularly in this pandemic where there's been learning loss and kids who are not acquiring the skills and the education attainment that they need, and definitely the impact on the mental wellness of the Black community and how this pandemic, again, has disproportionately affected our mental well-being. And that's true for all of us, including me as a member of Congress. We still face pressure and stress. And so we all need to be reminded that we have to take care of ourselves in order to be able to take care of. Well, as the first vice chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, we've outlined a very clear agenda for Black America. We presented it to President Biden and the administration. We literally just met with the president and senior officials of his cabinet and executive members from the Congressional Black Caucus at the White House recently. And we touched on 5 key elements in that meeting. One, of course, is voting rights, protecting the right to vote. We cannot get to the other issues if people don't feel like they have fair access to the ballot. And unfortunately, 19 states have passed somewhere around 34 laws to suppress the vote, making it harder for people to vote, whether that's by closing down early vote locations or limiting the calendar for early voting, or literally telling people that you can't pass out water to people who've had to stand in line hours in order to cast their ballot. So we have a bill, the Freedom to Vote John R. Lewis Act, which is central, number 1, to everything else. Number 2 is addressing crime and police accountability. Yes, we want our communities to be safe. Black people and Black communities are unfortunately disproportionately impacted by crime. But we also want there to be accountability for those who are serving in law enforcement, whether those are school police or community police, in making sure that they understand how to respect the communities that they're supposed to serve. And so we have a very clear agenda on eliminating the no-knock warrant, on banning the chokehold, on creating a national registry for those officers who have conducted bad practices so that they can't move from department to department. And my bill, the Break the Cycle of Violence Act, which would provide over $6.5 billion over 8 years to community-based interventions that we know work to actually stem violence, particularly gun-related violence. My father was shot when I was 19. He died from that shooting. And so I know personally how gun violence affects a family and a community. Obviously, there are constituents in my district who have experienced the same thing. And so I bring their perspective to this issue. The third issue that I talked about in that meeting was the economy and jobs, because again, while things are getting better and unemployment is now below 4%, and we're seeing the economy create 7.4 million jobs in just the last 13 months, which is the most of any administration in the first 13 months. What we know is in the Black community, that unemployment number is still stubbornly high. And so making sure that we are reaching those who have been chronically unemployed or underemployed to provide them with the job training, the connections to those emerging sectors, and the opportunity, because that's ultimately what people want. And then finally, we talked about the issue, and this came from Frederica Wilson from Florida. We have the Commission on the Status of Black Boys and Men. And I'm proud to be one of the commissioners that's been appointed. And the purpose of that commission is really to look at the, again, systemic issues that contribute to the status of Black boys and men in America and what we need to do to address them, not only in government, but in community, in the private sector, in the nonprofit sectors, and identify solutions so that we can uplift our young Black boys and young Black men in this country. Well, here in Nevada, we have been hit particularly hard during this pandemic and the economic recession that's followed over the past 2 years. One, because we are a tourism-based economy here in Las Vegas and North Las Vegas. And so more than a third of the workforce is directly tied to hospitality jobs. And even those who don't directly work for, they depend on people who do, whether that's the local cleaners or the local grocery store or what have you. And so when people in hospitality aren't working, it hurts everybody. Now things are coming back, but again, with the COVID-19 variants and other challenges, it's not yet to the level and the peak that we had pre-COVID. So what people have talked to me about in my district is really the effects of cost. The rising cost of rent on housing in our community has gone up almost 30% in the last year. And so for people who are on limited or fixed income, to have your rent go up at any amount is a pain point, but to have it go up $30, $40, $50 a month, literally now you're having to make choices about what you're going to give up. Also, right now with the gas prices the way they are, we're working right now on solutions on both the issue on housing rents and on gas prices, because I understand that until we address the problems right now, it's going to be real hard to get people to pay attention to the upcoming election, right? Because they're focused on taking care of themselves and their family and their household. And yeah, I care who's in office, but right now I got to care about how to put this, $10 in the tank to get to work or to drop the kids off at school. So primary issues are costs, containing cost in housing, on childcare, on things that people need to get to work, like transportation, and also to invest more in children and in young people as far as education and job training are concerned. And again, my background before I came to Congress, I led Nevada's largest employment and training agency, the Culinary Academy, for 10 years. And so my work was always involved in helping people acquire the skills they needed for good paying jobs. Now, I want to take that experience and help young people get the training for STEM jobs or new businesses, help them get into renewable energy. Here in Nevada, solar and geothermal are huge opportunities, but we need people to be properly trained in those sectors. And then of course, healthcare is a huge area where we have a major shortage, particularly of people of color who have cultural competency to work with communities that need care. So those are just a few areas that people talk to me about that I am working to deliver on in this upcoming election to encourage people to get out and keep us in office, but to keep us there for a reason. It's not to keep me, Steven Horsford, it's to keep someone who shares the values and the priorities that the district needs us to deliver on. For me, the most special moments are when a constituent will come up and say, thank you, because of your office, I was able to get help that I needed. I just talked to a person recently who was facing eviction and they didn't know where to go. And they contacted our office. My team went to work. Not only did they not get evicted, but we were able to connect them to community partners that provided them the support to get stable in their economic situation And those are the things that make all the difference. To know that we helped somebody today have just a better quality of life, to take one problem off of their shoulders and to give them a little bit of room to breathe. I think right now people are just trying to make it, and especially those of us in the Black community who, again, have experienced hardship in ways that are just so unimaginable. We have to come together to support each other at this important time.